that? Nary a delay. Interesting. But it doesn't seem to be playing on YouTube. As you observed, Charles, there was some, I guess you might call it a disturbance in the force.
That's right.
Almost as if a million voices cried out and then were suddenly silenced.
Maybe we could ask the audience if they...
Yeah, I don't know if this is going at... Well, okay, let's see. There's some problem with YouTube that we've just observed. It's got me signed out and it won't allow me to sign back in, so I don't know if our broadcast is going out right now. Let's see if it refreshes here. It still says waiting for Jason Goodman, so that's bad. Let me try to sign in here. The internet is a wild and woolly place, Charles. You never know what might happen on any given day. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting...
What is it? I can't read it.
It's a stack of TVs that says, sorry, we could not log you in. Please try later.
I think we should assume it's not going out.
Well, it's not going out on YouTube, which is a problem, at least not on the Jason Goodman channel. Let's see how Crowdsource the Truth 2 is doing. Interesting. Also not going.
What, as a suggestion, why don't we push it back for an hour or so, and resolve the problem?
I have no way of doing that. I don't know if we'll be able to resolve it. What we could also do is press on and then upload this video at any time in the future.
Okay, why not?
We'll do that. So welcome to Sunday with Charles.
It's
Charles.
Great to be here, Jason, and facing the adversity together.
Right. This is horrible adversity. Hopefully we can overcome it. I'm very confused by this. There seems to be nothing I can do right now. Oh, are people, YouTube down, someone is saying on Periscope. So I think there's a problem at YouTube. That makes sense. Well, we'll carry on here on Periscope, on Facebook, on DLive. Unfortunately, our viewers on patreon.com and subscribestar.com aren't going to be getting the show. Because what I typically do, Charles, is I reserve the only on Patreon shows. Those are fed through a different method other than YouTube to avoid such circumstances. But right now, I guess the only place people can see us live is going to be Periscope, DLive, VK.com, and some of these others. So I try to diversify the platforms. I apologize to our viewers on YouTube. This is a good indicator that perhaps for this show on Sundays, I should rely on the alternate platform for Patreon and Subscribestar. It's so important for viewers to become sponsors of the show because the viewer sponsorship is the only financial support that the show has. I've specifically made it a point of building Crowdsource the Truth around this type of model because I personally feel that the advertiser-driven model, although that was great when TV was invented in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, when we started having cable TV, people didn't want the FCC to censor what was being broadcast so they could subscribe to things like HBO or in whatever and get much more diverse programming that maybe was objectionable to, name the advertiser, Ivory Soap, whoever makes cigarettes and booze and all that stuff.
The non-advertiser.
Well, you know what I mean. There's advertisers that have an agenda that they want to push, but by keeping the business model at Crowdsource the Truth based on micro sponsorship from viewers, we're eliminating that financial influence that any sponsor would inherently have. So I hope that people will become sponsors of the show, even if they're just watching the free programming. They can go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, become a monthly sponsor. People can also become one-time sponsors by going to paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. And we still have that wonderful Sunday with Charles screensaver, which will be updated soon. And Bob Dirt will surely be going down in the annals of whatever.
Don't use that word.
Sorry. Yes.
Or phrase, I should say.
Right.
Actually, before we compliment the art department, one thing that I think is worth mentioning, commenting about what you just said, there was a story out last week about how people are coming to realize that whoever studies this stuff, and I don't know how objectively they can study it, is proclaiming that people today are actually dumber than they used to be because, in part, for a number of factors. I think one of the factors is what you talk about, that so much of the information that is fed to audiences around the world is in short sound bites. It's not developed. People are not trained the way they were in my day and your day to spend real time diving deeply into something that you care about so that you can hope to become a world expert. Instead, everyone's a surface level commentator. So what does so-and-so think? Well, so-and-so says this, so that means it's right. And they go from lily pad to lily pad, jumping around. Then they put on their yoga pants and they go and go to Starbucks or whatever. I mean, it's just, they're not digging deeply enough. And when I think about, I used to enjoy actually watching Fox and Fox News Sunday. I can't watch Fox. I will not watch Fox News Sunday anymore. I have a hard time with many of the Fox programs because there's so much commercial, so many objectionable commercials. And it's not only that there are commercials. I mean, I don't want to spend an hour listening to a litany of this thing, or your eyes will fall out. This thing, you get arthritis. This thing, diabetes. Right. Your wheelchair. Your MyPillow. I don't want to be assaulted with minute after minute of those things, and then to have to bear up and deal with Chris Wallace and some of those other people. It's not me. I don't need that. Well, I'd much rather have, in the limited time that I have to watch, I'd rather learn something. And I think that the way you're doing it, not only with this show, but with the other shows, is the correct way to do it. The challenge, of course, is when you start doing stuff for free, people say, well, if he's going to do it for free, why should I pay?
Right.
And so it comes a point when, maybe the price point needs to change, or you need to find a different way to get paid. But hats off to you on the tremendous growth in a short period of time.
We were talking about that just before the show, how here we are, June, middle of 2019. It's really hard to believe how quickly time is passing, but we're at the middle of the year. When I went back to 1 year ago, the growth of the channel in 1 year is good, but at the same time, over the next 6 months, I have some hard decisions to make because I'm earning a lot less money than I used to in my Hollywood career and in my career producing corporate video productions and things like that. So the next 6 months of 2019 will be critical for Crowdsource the Truth. I think most people probably know that I could essentially earn more money working at McDonald's and not subject myself to the daily harassment.
Plus the free food.
Free food, right. Do they sell food at McDonald's? I did not know that. But I do want to let everybody know that Periscope is working. YouTube seems to be having some YouTube-related problem, not a Crowdsource the Truth related problem. It just won't let me sign in, and it will not start the broadcast. So something's wrong with YouTube. People should sign up for Periscope as well. There were over 5,000 Periscope followers, and then it cut by like 500 in a day, which didn't
that's weird.
Make a lot of sense to me. So I don't know what's going on. We still have this broken TV thing coming from YouTube. So we'll just carry on with the show and upload it to YouTube later. Charles, I think everyone is really fixated, rightly so, on this press conference that Robert Mueller made. And I think that what you had said about people being less critical in their thinking, I think is true. I think our diets have changed from the time I was a young boy until now. The physiology of chickens and cattle, just the growth of companies like McDonald's have changed the way farming works, really in an international kind of way. And I think this is having an impact on our health, and the mind is part of the body. So if you're not healthy of body, you're going to be unhealthy of mind. The other thing is, when you look at James Comey and Robert Mueller, two guys that were the directors of the FBI, two guys that gave what seemed to most people like unusual press conferences at pivotal moments, I believe these two are engaging in social engineering, coming out in the public, utilizing social media, traditional media, etc., to essentially brainwash people, to put things out there that are outside the scope of the law. They're getting into psychology, they're getting into these sort of long-term plays where they're trying to convince people of things and trigger certain events like this impeachment that everybody keeps talking about that I feel like you're going to talk to us about today.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the case of Mueller, in the case of Comey, and really many high officials in government, the natural reaction, I would guess, that the normal American has is, well, the head of the FBI can't be a crook. The head of the CIA can't be a crook. Vice president can't be a crook. And so you're inclined to believe in these loyal, in theory, line FBI agents and these many members and lawyers in the Justice Department. And I think, what we're beginning to see now is that the extent, and today we're going to get into some great depth on this, that the extent of the corruption and rot inside the FBI, inside the Justice Department, inside the IRS it's pervasive.
And shocking.
And shockingly so. And I think, I would guess that Trump and his people have known about this for a very long time, and they've been trying to think through themselves, what's the best way of educating the American people so we could take it in, decide what to do in a rational fashion. I mean, we don't want to take out pitchforks and storm Washington, D.C., but I think what we see here is, particularly in these three Mice-keteers, I mean, I look at this picture and then I think about the long period of time that these three, in quotes, gentlemen held the most influential positions, in theory, protecting America. And I'm amazed that, we didn't suffer multiple 9/11s with these guys in charge of the pack. And frankly, every single one of them, for different reasons, needs to be investigated in great depth. There's no way any of these three people should have a security clearance at this point, in my view. And we really need to understand just how far off, and I use this word advisedly, the plantation, the Obama plantation, these people went from 2000, not just under Barack Obama, but prior to that under under W. Bush, Clinton, and before that under H.W. Bush. We really need to understand the logic that drives people like this who take out, their right hand, swear an oath on something that they're going to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States. They're not supposed to preserve and protect, George Soros's pocketbook.
Yeah, their own bank accounts.
Yeah, and some people look at a picture like this and say, "Oh, isn't this great?" People who are, Clinton said such vile things about W, and W, to be fair, did not really mouth off on either Clinton or Obama the way that Clinton and Obama trash talk W.
No, but does he just pull the string anytime he comes out, and there's a limited number of things he can say?
Right. But you look at this picture, and my reaction is utter revulsion.
Actually, I like this. This is perfect. Well, you could arrest them all at once. They're all there. These are three of the biggest putzes to walk the earth.
Yeah, exactly.
But, oh well.
Well, with that, why don't we...
through the slides?
Yeah, the art department, though, deserves a compliment, I think.
Well, Charles, I do want to share with everyone our growing playlist, but unfortunately, something went wrong. And we have the monkeys at Google are basically trying to fix YouTube with a hammer. I don't know how well that's going to go, but people can catch up with all of the Sunday with Charles episodes, and although it's on temporary hiatus, people can also get the Charles Ortel is Closing In episodes by going, when it is restored, to YouTube and the Jason Goodman channel and the playlist for Sunday with Charles.
Yeah, so I think it's past time to go after Robert Mueller with a baseball bat here. I mean, I think this is somebody who has abused...
Theoretically speaking.
Right.
Legal baseball
bat. But this is somebody who has grossly abused his authority over decades in a manner that not only has harmed people. I mean, people have died because of his behavior, falsely accused and convicted in prison. People rotted in prison over to protect an FBI informant, and there are other problems that we could go into in great depth. And this guy, Swan, his middle name is Swan. He swans around the world, affecting this holier than thou. I'm a decorated Marine. I'm nonpartisan. I don't get involved in politics. And the mainstream media, especially including Fake Yapper and people like Rachel Maddow and others, now, because he seems to be greasing the wheel for impeachment, suddenly they like Mueller. But this guy is not above the law. Donald Trump is also not above the law. Nobody's above the law, but Bob Mueller.
He's not even above board.
Yeah, Bob Mueller, and as we're going to show, people need to remember that he was the Deputy Attorney General, I believe, the day W. Bush, around the day that W. Bush was sworn in on January 20th, 2001. Mueller was, the head of the FBI reported to Mueller. And then Mueller took, I think, a slightly different job, and then he took a short break, but then he came back in as head of the FBI a week before 9/11, on September 4th, 2001, and he held that role as head of the FBI right the way through to September 4th, 2013, after Barack Obama was, in quotes, safely reelected.
Wasn't it 2014? I think he spent 13 years as the director of the FBI.
13. And after Hillary Clinton had made the transition from being a corrupt senator and a corrupt Secretary of State person to being a corrupt operative inside her unfairly named Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. So this is a guy who held a very high position where, in theory, he had access to information about most everything that the FBI was investigating. And we know from prior broadcasts we've demonstrated that Bob Mueller was personally briefed about the status of the Clinton Foundation in mid-year, I think, 2002, and there's no way something as sensitive as investigating the Clinton Foundation for 4 years wouldn't have come to the attention or have been a passing interest to the head of the FBI. So we've been building the case for several years now that this Mueller assault against Trump that began officially May 17th, 2017, and our show began the next month, has been an attempt by the Uniparty backing Bob Mueller to obstruct a true investigation into the fine contours or the broad contours of the Clinton corruption engine masquerading as charities inside and outside the U.S. It has been an aggressive, partisan, and I would argue illegally founded investigation without a predicate. They were never investigating a crime. They were investigating, collusion, which is not a federal crime. And in the end, they were forced several years after they started to admit, we found no evidence of an American participating in any kind of conspiracy, which is a crime, to affect the outcome of the 2016 election. So here's Mueller working for about 2 years on a project that wasn't really lawfully started in the first place, aggressively, vindictively targeting people like Jerry Corsi and others, sending more people against, I believe, Manafort than they sent against Osama bin Laden to recapture him, and knocking down Roger Stone's door, and yet giving free passes to the corrupt Clinton operatives who have been working hand in glove with the Clinton family since before Bill Clinton was president to monetize his role as a president and then his role as the husband of somebody who was likely to be a president and maybe the father of somebody who could eventually someday become president. So Mueller,
Chelsea?
Yeah, well, that's the theory originally.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I don't think she might be end up being president of the kingdom of, what's that, king of Lesotho or something?
I'm thinking of PTA.
But no, that was the theory. And Mueller here has been in this position of great power, lording his authority over many people, targeting, trying to get Jerry Corsi to lie, to confess to a crime he didn't commit, using the full force of the Justice Department, the FBI, against a 72-year-old man. It's just a gross abuse of power. And it's not like we can say, oh, well, Mueller made a mistake, Starr may have made a mistake, let's let bygones be bygones and move along. No, they crossed a line here, and in particular, you referenced this press conference, which I didn't watch.
Oh.
But I just couldn't watch it at the time. But I've seen summaries of it, and he definitely comes across as not like we do this, a natural conversation where we know the subject matter. He was reading off of script.
Yeah, he's looking down basically the whole time.
And the basic thing that he did was so abhorrent to the notion of justice. I know Sidney Powell's talked about it, Hannity's talked, many people have talked about it, but just to refresh everybody's recollection, in this country, we do not have a star chamber where some political hack, Mueller, can get a whole bunch of government resources and then pick a person before the crime has been identified and then dry clean that person's life to see if there are any crimes that'll shake out of there. And then, when somebody above that prosecutor says, you can't go any further with this, you don't get a chance, as Mueller has done and as Comey has done, Comey to Hillary Clinton, and Mueller to really to Donald Trump, you don't get the right anywhere. And indeed, it's against Justice Department regulations, I'm told, for a prosecutor, and that's what Mueller was, to speak disparagingly about somebody who wasn't charged with the crime. You're just not allowed to do that, and he did it. So Barr has to, and Trump has to, I think, for the benefit of the entire political spectrum, make a big issue, both over what happened in July of 2016. We talk about Mueller's all into trying to figure out, did people collude to affect the election of 2016? I mean,
no, he's determined that the Russians did affect it. Forget about any evidence showing that.
What about the evidence that, forget about foreigners affecting the election. What about the Democratic Party? What about Perkins Coie? What about the Hillary Clinton campaign? What about Donna Brazile and the insiders, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, colluding illegally and in many ways against state laws, against federal laws, to dramatically affect the election by stepping on the back of Bernie Sanders, making sure he didn't get a shot, and then by thinking that they were going to rig the election and force Donald Trump out. I mean, this whole it's one thing to be a political partisan, which I hate that life, and I stay as far away from that area as I possibly can. But I think I can understand that people would think when you're in an election, you're going to do everything lawfully possible to get dirt on your opponent and protect your candidate, and if you've got a way of doing something really tricky and clever that'll make either the opponent look bad or you look good, you have hatchet people to do that for you. I understand that that's the way the life works. I'm not naive, but you cannot be doing that with taxpayer resources. You absolutely can't take either government funds from your CIA or FBI or other government officials' salary and staff and the special tools that our government has to get inside what's going on in this country. You may not use that for partisan political ends, and that's exactly what they did during the election. And then once they were shocked and they realized that they couldn't even rig the general election properly, they probably thought they had it rigged.
Can't even cheat properly.
Yeah, what we got to do now is we got to overturn the results of the election. And first we got to resist, maybe challenge the election results. That didn't work. Then we've got to make the inauguration period difficult. That didn't work, and he was sworn in. Then we got to send rumors flying around the world that Donald Trump is incompetent, has lost his mind, and it was a coordinated campaign against him, which is nasty as hell.
Yeah.
Well beyond what happened. Let's say the worst excesses of Richard Nixon, which was really bad. And we have at the same time these tooth fairies in mainstream media going around and accepting the idea that if you look into the Obama period, you'll find that it was scandal-free. I mean, it's just ridiculous that even Barack Obama would say that kind of stuff now, because it's just so manifestly untrue.
Yeah.
So when I look at this, what Mueller's been doing, and it's so far away from being lawful, it's so far away from the norms, I ask the question, why would he do this? Because he's not completely stupid, right? He's doing it because he and others don't want you, the viewership, to understand just how corrupt this government has become in the age of social media, in the age of rising tech power, in the age where the population is, frankly, richer and happier than it's ever been before, and not inclined to rock the boat. So, I mean, I think what they've been trying to do here is to cover up the biggest con job ever attempted on a wealthy nation and on the planet itself. And whenever they scream about something, when Schiff starts screaming about something, when Schumer screams about it, when Obama, he doesn't scream, Nadler, the reason they're screaming about it is They're scared as shit that this
They're
is going
in
to come.
trouble.
And I found it incredibly interesting for the book project. I'm going into quite a lot of detail on the past. And one of the things that I've discovered, which is really interesting, is that Hillary, after Monica Lewinsky rumor bubbled up on Drudge, Hillary Clinton made history in a Matt Lauer interview, commenting or alleging that there's a vast right-wing conspiracy on January 27th, 1998, 2 days before the IRS issued a determination letter for the Clinton Foundation. So, I mean, here's Hillary saying there's a vast right-wing conspiracy when she knows that she is at the center, literally joined at the hip from time to time with Bill Clinton, leading a vast, and I wouldn't call it a left-wing, I wouldn't even call it progressive, I just call it a vast
Criminal conspiracy
to get inside and to retain control over the most, over the critical organs of the most powerful government on earth. And now that Mueller has been, forced, I mean, now the conversations, the internal conversations that will eventually come to light as to why he decided ultimately that he couldn't go forward with anything against Trump and anything on collusion, those internal conversations are going to be very interesting to read, and we will get to see them eventually, chiefly because we're going to, I and others will jump back and say, no, wait a minute, I'm not interested in whether Mueller couldn't read a script properly. I'm not interested even in the shocking fact that he couldn't find something that wasn't there. I mean, Hillary Clinton was a horrible candidate.
Yeah.
She was a discredit to feminists. She was a discredit to Democrats. She was a discredit to Americans. She didn't even fucking campaign. She didn't campaign. It's like, as even Obama said, it's kind of helpful if you want to win an office to show up and say rallies in key states.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not. Maybe.
Let me take you back for a second, Charles, because you pointed out how Mueller, how what he did kind of politicized it, but I think it goes beyond politics. He is literally, he is educating the public when he goes on television, maybe even more so than school. And he's saying, well, we didn't find that he didn't do a crime. How many people's brains are now, this is like you have the right to be believed. No, you don't. Right. This is not the way this works.
Well, but that's why I say Trump and Barr and Ray, I think it's a lot of explaining to do, but our federal government needs to stand up and chastise Mueller and chastise Comey for the absolutely investigate, prosecute, and incarcerate these people, because you cannot. People are gullible; they're not going to necessarily check the facts. And when we talk, the very same people who are decrying America, Obama's down in one of my grandmother's original countries in Brazil, basically talking smack, saying, he actually said that everybody knows that in America you can buy a machine gun over the internet. No, you can't.
Obama said that?
Yeah, in Brazil.
Are you sure you can't? I thought you could.
Pretty sure you can't buy a machine gun with no checking.
I don't know.
Pretty sure. But I mean, he makes comments that this is not, and he also said this isn't a great country because it was founded on inequality.
That's what Obama said? Yeah. He went to another country and said America's not a great country?
Right, and to say something like that, without asking, all right, how bad is inequality?
In Brazil.
In Brazil or around the world. I mean, and what does inequality actually mean to begin with anyway? There are a lot of rich people who are extremely unhappy, depressed, clinically depressed, and yes, they have more money, but are they in a better place than somebody who's not clinically depressed and can enjoy the remaining minutes that each of us has here on Earth? So the kind of comments that are coming out of Barack Obama and others, and this recent statement by Swanee Mueller in between his whiskey gulps, that Trump was not exonerated. He has no right of exoneration. Yeah. And this experiment that has worked in fits and starts, and didn't start out perfectly, starting in 1789 under the Constitution forward, it may not, nothing's going to be perfect. Each of us is imperfect. But this experiment has produced rising living standards for an enormous number of citizens and for others around the world who trade with this great country, under a principle that you are actually innocent until the government, with its resources, proves to the requisite standard, whether beyond a reasonable doubt or by a preponderance of evidence, that you're guilty of a crime. But you have a right to face your accusers. I mean, this guy, Mueller, should get his law license yanked. And all the people, the Nadlers of the world, others who are encouraging this idea that you can outsource
Government stuff?
Congress's work to the special counsel, you know, that's not the way it works. The President of the United States is the leader of a co-equal branch of government. Our Constitution, evidently these morons, many of them who still, some of whom have been in Congress for 40 years, never read the Constitution or remember this important principle. If you want to remove a president, you've got to remove a president for high crimes or misdemeanors. You can't remove a president because you don't like the fact that he won an election or that he used vulgar language or that he's a billionaire. Those aren't reasons that you can impeach a president of the United States.
Now, Charles, real quickly, I'm very confident that you know more about Brazil history than I do, but wasn't it something along the lines of a bunch of Portuguese people went there, killed a lot of indigenous folks and moved in?
Well, I don't know.
Something along those lines.
That's a good summary, maybe. Actually, the thing that's a little bit different about Portugal is that Brazil, according to my brother, who does know a lot, who's lived in Brazil for a long time and is an expert on Brazil, is that it was less the case, actually, in Brazil. Definitely in the Spanish, Portugal versus Spain, in the Spanish colonization efforts, there you're talking about eradication, whether by slaughter or unwittingly by spreading disease. Less so in Brazil. In Brazil, I mean, you've been to Brazil.
Well, I mean, it doesn't seem to me that the indigenous peoples of Brazil built Sao Paulo and Rio. That seems more like European stuff.
That's definitely.
So somebody came in there, pushed somebody off the land, and said, "This is a nice place. We'll take it."
Again, Brazil actually was the biggest transporter of slave labor from Africa by far. Was from southern Africa, Angola area, down to Brazil. Actually, it's like many times the volume of Africans who were enslaved or had been enslaved or were enslaved and brought into typically the Caribbean and the American South. But we're digressing, I think, a little bit here.
Right.
So, if we could go back to in Robert Mueller, we have somebody who's really a shameful individual.
Yes.
Or shameless.
Disgraceful.
But he needs to. We need to make an example of what we need to find out what really happened here, and we need to go deeply into the rationale for this all happening. Who are the important parties? We can't just let Mueller, walk the gangplank and all the people who were pulling the strings of Robert Mueller get away with pulling somebody else's strings, say Kamala Harris's strings, or you name it, after 2024. So there's been a real effort here to stop Donald Trump from doing what he pledged to do to his supporters, and actually from stopping those of us, myself included, who would like to see national order restored inside the important markets in the world. And then if we need to have some sort of globalist structure, let's actually have real rules. Let's not set something up that only the United States is hobbled by, let's say, the polluting rules, and we'll let India and China pollute the hell out of the earth because they won't comply with the rules. We can't have that kind of approach. We have national order. It must work inside the nations. We barely have in the United States of America, a rich country, enough common interest to try to manage only 325 million people. How in the hell is any kind of globalist scheme going to, in quotes, manage in a way that we'd find comforting and comfortable 7.5 or 7.7 billion people presently on this planet? So people have been creating this. Globalism sounds great. It certainly sounds great on the Ivy League campuses because suddenly globalism gives you many more candidates to overpay for your expensive education. Many more rich people around the world try to buy their way into these places. The professors love it, gives them all these projects to do around the world. Bankers love it, investors love it, media loves it. I mean, it sounds great, globalism. It's much better than focusing on Trenton, New Jersey or the Northeast. I mean, you get to focus on the whole damn planet.
Yeah. Hey.
And instead of you set up crowdsource the truth, I mean, here we've got people watching this show when it goes out on YouTube eventually.
Yeah, we've got a very reduced audience today because people are going to YouTube and seeing nothing.
Right. But when they do watch it, should they watch it later on, they will be watching it around the world. And so it's good for certain types of businesses, globalism. It creates valuations for businesses that can build out a global footprint that are far higher than in the past. But we now, I think, we're very close, assuming that, Google doesn't now decide to shut us and every other critic down of globalism, and the mainstream and others don't shut us down. I think we're close to understanding what really actually happened and just how egregiously bad these uniparty conspirators actually are.
Indeed.
So with that,
unfortunately, Charles, we're not able to show so much of what we normally show because YouTube is having some kind of technical problem now.
so we can't even show the slides?
We can show the slides.
Okay.
I mean, I like the playlist and stuff.
Oh, okay. So I gather, I don't know the current numbers, obviously, because we're not connected, but your viewership is, approaching 100,000 for all combined, right? For Crowdsource the Truth 2 and for this main channel and other.
There's been bizarre fluctuations in the subscribership. It is up overall, over 100 new subscribers in the month of May, but that's slow growth compared to the 2-year history of the channel, and it's behaving erratically. Perhaps this is normal fluctuation for this point in the progress, but it seems unusual to me, Charles.
I just think we're going to enter a new adjective in into the Oxford English Dictionary, which is, you've been smoletted.
Yeah,
that seems to be the playbook. You get somebody to complain, to make a false accusation, maybe more than one person to make a false accusation to these Twitter, Facebook, Google entities which are inclined to dislike conservatives and anti-globalists anyway, and then they just put the thumb on the scale.
Well, I believe this is a legitimate technical issue, or at least that's the best estimate I can make right now. It is weird that I was sort of watching YouTube all morning, and then the moment we set out to go live, this happens. Could be a coincidence.
Yeah.
I think it is.
But just for the new viewers, when you get to this, this approach is very different than the approach you're going to find on NBC News or ABC or even Fox. What we're encouraging you to do is not just to watch this episode, but after you get through it, if you're interested, follow the links here. There are a lot of very helpful links that both in this broadcast, this is our 161st broadcast. This one will certainly be 2 hours. So there's a lot of material out there, not because we just like to talk, but because this is the largest set of unprosecuted frauds ever attempted in the world. So we wanted to do it justice. Jason and I figured this out early on, that this was a big story to tell and that we would have to tell it in layers. Today we're going to take you down a level of detail that is shocking and that shows, I think, proves beyond doubt that the problem here is not, as we've said all along, that it's a fraud. The problem is that the IRS has been covering up this fraud. The IRS knew about this fraud. And I think there are elements within the IRS that saw this fraud happening and saw the power of the right-wing, right-leaning charity universe, and were fearful in 2009 and 10 that stumbling Barack Obama would be brought down by the rising Tea Party and others, that they decided to target. They made a linked decision. They said, we're going to target the Tea Party, stamp it out of existence, while we let the Clintons slide and expand their fraud. Why? Because Barack Obama and Jarrett probably figured they'd be in for 2 years and that Hillary would be in for the next 8, and there's no way that they'd ever get caught. Right. And even if they did get caught, they get the deference of, a court of, well, we're former presidents, our people must have erred. I mean, I can't follow everything. I've been giving speeches. I've been doing that. I'm too busy with books and my legacy and my good works. How was I supposed, But this is an effort that people in the viewership have been extremely helpful with, helping us with investigations, trigger investigations around the world. And each week we make progress, some weeks more progress than others, but this will be, I think, a fateful week coming up here.
Well, and that's interesting that we've never had an outage like this before, Charles. It's really frustrating. And even while you're talking, I'm working to try to restore the normal broadcast, but it does not look like YouTube is wanting to cooperate. It's giving me a picture of a broken robot.
That's Silicon Valley, broken robot.
That's what you get.
So, well, why don't we dive into the next slide? And we just have one short slide here about current events. And the first link, if we can pull that one up, came up this morning, or at least I saw it this morning. It might have come out last night. And this is outrageous stuff. These are, I don't know who Almost Jingo is.
Where do we see that?
This at Almost Jingo, but there's further down. There's this Undercover Huber, John W. Huber.
But it says Rosie Mimos.
I know, but further, it's all a fraud tweet. Replying to a tweet by Undercover Huber, and then it goes on to reference Technofog.
It's interesting how Devin Nunes likes Undercover Huber, but not Devin Nunes' cow. So anonymous Twitter accounts are okay with him as long as they're talking about stuff that he likes.
Right. Well, so the sum and substance of this is they found evidence that in the Mueller report, they redacted important information that would present the explosive charge, a potential charge of obstruction, in a very different light once you know the context. And this is classic Andrew Weissmann behavior. So what he did in the Arthur Anderson trial, Sidney Powell has documented, years of, I would argue, illegal behavior, of Avenatti style, legal behavior. And this Weissmann, was picked, I don't know by whom, but to be the pit bull of the Mueller investigation. To me, Weissmann, again, he should be investigated. People should consider carefully the many crimes that he did commit, and then they should decide the best way to give him a fair trial and let him try to defend himself. And let's hope the government wins that case, and let's hope they throw, not the book, they should throw
the library,
the whole suite of presidential libraries at this guy.
He's really a terrible guy.
And not just him, and Jeannie Rhee and the others. And this isn't a retribution, this is for crimes and to rebalance the scales of justice in America. They're out of balance.
Charles, I saw a super interview with super lawyer and friend of the show, Sidney Powell, where she revealed that she's writing a new book.
Right.
This was on the video channel, the YouTube channel for, I think, Epoch Times, which people in the Periscope comments are telling me that there has now been announced a worldwide outage of YouTube.
The links they'll go to stop us from going on
I know,
air.
exactly. But the point is, Sidney Powell said in this interview that she's writing a book that includes specific recommendations for how the Justice Department and the legal system should change to be more reflective of the intentions of the founding fathers. And what Robert Mueller said the other day is 180 degrees out. He could go work for Chairman Mao.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy, it's very distressing. So this is too long to go over in depth, but this is a good story to read, and I think this will have legs in the next 24 hours.
Did the government just test the internet kill switch, is what Zero Hedge is talking about. And I think they're saying that YouTube is down.
Wow.
But the article won't even load because the internet kill switch has been hit. Anyway, we'll keep our eyes on that story as it develops, Charles.
Now, this in the Gateway, friend and Jim Hoffman, the Gateway pundit, is suggesting that, and I don't know which is true. I've heard differing reports here. I have one report that Hubert never did anything, and then other reports suggest that he may actually have been working on a team that's looking at other matters. We don't yet know exactly what they are. We would hope perhaps they might include Uranium One, they might include other aspects of the corrupt Clinton Foundation. But if it is true that Sessions got up there and announced to placate or attempt to placate people who wanted an investigation.
Barr, you mean?
No. If it's true that when Sessions was the AG,
Oh.
and Republicans were complaining that there wasn't an investigation, and he got up and he said, "Don't worry, I put John Huber on it," and then he, behind the scenes, said to you, "If it's true, don't do anything," then Sessions needs to be investigated too, because I think there are many who just suspect Sessions was part of the problem. Indeed, maybe even was inserted into the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
I find his behavior to be deeply troubling. That's to say, Sessions' behavior, and I do want to know what the hell Huber's been up to.
I'm on the side of probably nothing. I think he wouldn't even have to tell him. If you work in Washington, doing nothing just comes naturally.
That's right.
Don't need to be prompted.
So this may be the first time that I've actually recommended anybody read an article in The Nation, which is a hard left thing. But I've actually had the pleasure of meeting Stephen Cohen in the green room over at RT. And he's a smart guy. And he is basically saying in the piece that these charges of getting the Russiagate thing moving ranks by far away as the most serious scandal in American history.
Yeah.
Dwarfing Watergate.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Watergate's a little pimple compared to this.
Maybe murdering and covering up JFK.
Well, I mean, how many people have, been falsely accused here / died? Do we really know what happened? Thinking about Mueller, I go right back to my fateful meeting with Anna Chapman several days before she was arrested, which I did tell the FBI about, actually. And my feeling at the time, which has only been reinforced with the passage of time, it made no sense to round her or the other spies up and then immediately, very quickly, to ship them off to Russia. That made no sense in 2010, late June, early July 2010, until you start thinking about what was happening in late June, early July 2010. What was happening is that the Tea Party movement was getting more and more effective and pissed off at the state of affairs. And the final straw might have been if we had known the full extent to which Russians had put spies into maybe the Bush administration, but certainly the Obama administration. And there's chatter that there was an effort that they'd penetrated Hillary Clinton's close circle, and that they were concerned that that would leak out prior to the November 2010 election. I mean, I think this is something, if we have any remaining real journalists who would like to maybe win a Pulitzer Prize, that's a way to do that. I mean, to go back into the records to say, wait a minute, why did this man Mueller make a decision to allow his team to raid the way they raided, and then why did he recommend to the president this unequal exchange of, we only got a few people back, including one of the people we got back wasn't at Skripal. I think was one of the people we got back in that trade, I'm pretty sure, or somebody close to Skripal, I can't remember which.
Wasn't Skripal that technology?
The guy was poisoned.
Oh, right. What was the technology thing called? That campus that was supposed to be like a...
Skolkovo.
Skolkovo. Sorry.
Yeah.
Confusing my S words.
Yeah. So that's really that's an article that goes into that in some depth. And now here, this is, the fourth piece here is Clarice Feldman, who is really very, very good writer and extremely funny as well. But this is a long piece that basically explains just how ably Mueller has beclowned himself here. And it makes some of these connections that people have talked about he's related to Charles Cabell.
Yeah.
And his cousin is Richard Bissell, the CIA's director of plans. Now, you can't do anything about your ancestry unless you're Hiawatha or Rachel Dolezal. You can make up your ancestry. But these people, I'm not upset with Mueller because he had maybe bad actor ancestors. I'm upset with him that a person who grew up with this much privilege and such a cushy life would end up nearly destroying the Constitution at this critical moment in history where social media and Google and others and Amazon are so powerful, and where thanks to Obama and to a lesser extent, well, and to W. Bush, we've got so much debt on this country, government, personal, bank, as other means of debt, so much debt that our financial options are not as robust as they might have been had we not piled up this gigantic debt. So this is a good article, again, not to dwell on it at the moment, that does explain just how ably Robert Mueller has made a fool of himself, frankly, and I think it's time for his full record to come out.
I didn't know that he kept 4 innocent men in jail for 35 years to protect the vicious criminal Whitey Bulger, who under very suspicious circumstances was killed in prison himself.
Right.
Robert Mueller, boy, I really would like to see a full investigation of that guy.
Yeah. So, and then, someone on Twitter sent me,
Sorry.
No, this one, yeah. China is now threatening and thinking that they're going to huff and puff and blow us all down. Now, nobody wants to spark a nuclear war over trade, but as we've demonstrated through review of globalist data, untampered with by me, we just take their data, and we've shown you how small the Chinese market is and how much of an investment bubble is inside China. It's not like, American companies need the Chinese market today to make a big difference in how an American company is going to do globally. But the Chinese absolutely need access to the US market. And what's been going on under Obama and under W. Bush and under Clinton and even under H.W. Bush at the beginning is we allowed the Chinese to dump products on this market at unfairly low prices, which in theory you could say benefited our consumers. But in practice, by allowing that onslaught of these lost...
You mean like TVs for $500 that are should be $5,000?
Right, well, but so why that's not so smart, we shouldn't be thinking about the fact that you got your TV for $500. We should be thinking of the fact that if the markets were fairly regulated, and if we really cared about, for example, the environment, we wouldn't let Chinese companies disrespect and devour the Chinese environment and the global environment by the way in which they manufacture these things, so they can subsidize these loss-leading operations. Because what we're doing when we do that, we destroy the American television production industry.
Well, that happened long ago. Zenith, RCA, they used to make all the TVs. Right. But then it went to Japan. China didn't become a manufacturer. I don't know that much about it. I will say, Charles, this picture is really interesting because anytime I see Trump in this kind of picture, I'm just thinking, you did a great job with that big trade war, but you're fired.
That's right.
It looks like you, right?
You're fired. But I hope that they're going to work this out in the end. I think that there's a lot of talk coming out of China, but there are very few options. Gordon Chang is somebody I've come to know over the years, got a new book out on actually the history, a facet of the Chinese role in the West, American West. It's not a current book, but he correctly predicted years ago that China would come to a place much like this place, where their tricks are going to catch up with them, and they're going to have to fight fair. And so, this is again another lengthy piece people can read. If we go back to the slide. There's been a lot of talk about how Bill and Hillary, went from being basically $10 million or $14 million in debt to being multimillionaires. And as we think about, there's a glowing piece apparently in Architectural Digest, this issue where Hillary Clinton takes you inside their beautiful home in Washington, D.C. Chelsea, we've shown you her apartment. They've got the place at Chappaqua. Let's not forget that a high-level person in the Hillary State Department has pled guilty to spying for China. Let's not forget that the Chinese, various shady Chinese operatives, were intimately involved helping Bill get reelected in 1996.
Charlie Tree. Where's this article from?
I just found it on the internet, but I had seen it previously that this had happened. So we need, we need to put. I have this friend, a mentor from years ago, who would say whenever we did a deal analysis, he would reduce it to the essence of what he called a has-gets analysis. What do I has and what do I gets? And when you think about China in 1989, they had at that time precious little. I mean, the economy was very, very undeveloped. A large number of people, the infrastructure was not developed. They had been outside the system of the market-based system of exchange for a long, long time, for 40 years. And they needed a lot. And so powerful politicians like H.W. Bush and then Clinton and then W. Bush and then Obama and the people around them could very easily be bought off for small amounts of money. And things of enormous value, be they missile technology, telecommunications technology, you name it. The transfer of that kind of stuff into China, into India, has been occasioned by people like this, who I hope are going to rot in prison. And we shouldn't just say that it's normal for Hillary and Bill to have a negative net worth of $10 or $15 million, and just as normal for them to not have a care in the world today, and live in these mansions, fly around in private jets, and then not investigate the Clinton Foundation, which to me is the conduit that was used. It is the thing hiding out there, the elephant in the room hiding out there that absolutely must be investigated.
Do you know this guy, Charles?
Bill or Powell or
No. The other guy.
Yeah.
John Kashvili. He was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His father was a Waffen SS officer. He's a first-generation American. Well, he wasn't even born here, so I don't know if that counts. But he apparently was the guy who went to China and gave them all kinds of military information at the order of the president.
President Clinton.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's, I'm all for the advancement of technology. I'm all for, in the United States especially, us encouraging to have robust primary research capabilities that then will lead, one would hope, over time into commercial applications that benefit all of us. But I am definitely not for allowing politicians to get access to secrets and then trade on those secrets to reward the political donor class and allow them, the donor class, to make billions and hundreds of billions and throw tips to these politicians in the way of a mansion here and a mansion there.
Right. Sabatini wants to know, how the hell is Charles not working in the Trump White House?
It's very, very simple. I don't want to work for anybody else.
Exactly. It would become the Charles White House.
No, I don't even want to do that. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing, contributing the way I'm contributing, and deciding what I do every day, and not worrying about what somebody else wants to do.
Right.
So, and I'm trying to help. So then on this Mexican issue is another great thing from the conservative treehouse. This is a good question that Trump poses. Are the drug lords, cartels, and coyotes really running Mexico? Now,
the answer is yes.
I think that there is, and if we wanted to change the situation, if we have a situation where the president of Mexico, the last one, got paid $100 million allegedly by El Chapo, we have a situation where it's rumored that El Chapo was contributing money to get influence in the United States via the Clinton Foundation. Yes. I think that we have a problem with this because there are too many people benefiting from the status quo situation, and Trump needs to call these people out. Barr is the Attorney General. We need to decide whether Wray is a decent FBI person or not. My sense is not.
Yeah.
We need to get him the hell out of there, put somebody, an ass kicker in, and we need to give Mexico and these other countries some choices. And the people who would defend this behavior, hard choices. That, by the way, wasn't that a book by Hillary Clinton, Hard Choices?
I think yes. I also think that El Chapo is kind of muddying the waters of the possibility of having contributed to the Clinton Foundation by using his English name, the Chapo.
The Chapo Foundation.
Very, very hard to figure out who that is.
Yeah. So then we have this very interesting, this Theresa May blow up, and I would pose to our friends in England, I think this Trump visit this coming week will be fascinating to see what happens. But I would pose the following question. What if we didn't catch all of the spies that had been infiltrated into the UK back when the various scandals emerged, whenever they did emerge, about Russian penetration into the establishment in the UK. What if there are a large number of, not just Russian, call them globalist spies, who've decided it's much more interesting to run the UK as a core spoke within the globalist structure than it is to run it according to their national constitution. And because the UK is an older international force than the United States, and because it has deep experience around the world in key markets, really useful to corrupt the UK. And I think we need to, look with a critical eye. Right now, I believe Pompeo has threatened the Germans that if they continue to work with Huawei, we're not going to share intelligence. We may have to do the same thing with the UK. We may have to say, listen, turn London into a Shitholi under your mayor. Go do that, okay? You've got one big city to speak
Enjoy.
of, and have at it. But we're not sharing intelligence with you. We're not going down this track. If we give you access to our stuff and then you stab us in the back the way you may have done through the Clinton Foundation using Downer and others.
No pun intended.
Right. So I think the May tenure as Prime Minister will stand in stark contrast to Margaret Thatcher's years, where Margaret Thatcher really was an outstanding Prime Minister in my view.
The Iron Lady.
Very dangerous time.
Interesting. We'll have to see what may happen.
She's actually one of the. I've spent time with her and by accident on an airplane, but I've also met another Prime Minister.
How did that article not attribute the wrongful imprisonment of Julian Assange to her legacy?
Yeah, well, it should. It should. And so then we have some good news. Maybe this is why Google's down, but if we look at this finance piece here that you got in. Over the weekend, it appears that our federal government is going to go all into Google.
Oh.
And this was announced. And so maybe this is something.
So they say starting at 3 p.m., coincidentally, we're going to be giving a proctological exam to Google.
Yeah.
It just won't load. I'm still trying it.
Yeah. So maybe this is the government illustrating just how powerful Google has become. But I do think it is a fair, you have to have a counterweight to people who will think rapaciously, especially as those people get richer and richer and think that no one's ever going to catch up to them. I remember
Michael Moore texts me that he can't get the videos to play on Patreon. I wonder if he's trying to play this one or something else is happening. Sorry.
It's all right. But
a lot of emails coming in from people who are upset that they can't watch Sunday with Charles. Listen, everybody who's watching us right now on Periscope, please tweet that, share that, let people know that there's a YouTube technical problem and they can watch Sunday with Charles on Periscope.
And perhaps we should even...
Show is not playing. Everybody is telling me all this.
Should we perhaps tweet?
I will tweet it.
The Periscope link or whatever. But I think it is a good move to rein, to strike a new balance here. I don't think anybody, even the original investors in Google and elsewhere, I don't think any of these people understood just how powerful Google and Amazon and these other tech giants might become. Because what we see, unlike, let's say, Boeing and Airbus or General Motors and Toyota, what we see in tech land is the first mover, typically with a groundbreaking big product or service. That first mover tends to have a dominant market share, not like 45%. It could be 85, 90, 95, even approaching 100%. And how do you deal with that? I mean, how do you I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do know that we talk about inequality in life. You want to look at inequality, look across high tech. And the established venture investors, the big firms, the unicorns, et cetera, have so much power. And indeed, they have power that rivals the power of the federal government, which in theory is the most powerful organization on earth. So how to strike a balance there? What is the right thing to do? as, in particular, what we're doing as these tech giants hide behind a provision of the law that says, that gives them protection and allows them to, for the moment, stamp out dissenting views if they're conservative and promote views of crooked globalists like the Clintons and the Obamas because it suits them. I mean, how do you deal with that? The answer is we're not dealing with it properly. And you see in the president somebody who's willing to take them on. But on the other hand, in order to make a difference here, we who care about this, we have to raise our voices the way I am, the way Jason is, and others. And we have to push people to rewrite the balance here because these tech giants are way too powerful.
Yeah, and part of the way that people can help us do that is if you start to follow on Periscope, of course, and some of these alternative platforms. I mean, Periscope is obviously owned by Twitter, so that's not doing much better. But the idea is if we can, people can get onto Periscope. You can get onto patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Unfortunately, the broadcast today on Patreon is being fed by YouTube, so perhaps future broadcasts I'll go back to the old way of doing it where everybody on Patreon is always getting Vimeo. But really all we can do, Charles, is have these multiple platforms and redundancy. That's the key in any system, and actually part of the problem that Boeing is facing because they had a system that was relying on just one sensor and a dangerous lack of redundancy.
Yeah. So, and then I guess Amazon is also being now targeted. And I am noticing, I walk everywhere across New York City, and it's just, we're getting to a point in certain blocks in the city.
No retail stores.
Yeah, they're just all gone.
They are out of business. Unless you have a restaurant or a coffee place or something.
Restaurants are dropping too.
Yeah.
They're going through the cycle of, they don't pay their rent, then the landlord says, well, we'll keep you around, then they're gone. But when we think through an Amazon, I do think that governments were not quick enough in the beginning to understand that a major league advantage Amazon has had, it's been changed recently, but it had for a long time the ability to sell goods and sell items to you where you didn't pay sales tax. And in New York City, sales tax approaches 9%. They've changed that, but I think they've changed it.
I don't think so. I think you still do not pay sales tax on Amazon.
So very few companies make 9% after-tax margins. Right. All right, and now what you're doing is you're saying, all right, Amazon doesn't have to pay sales tax, and in addition, you don't have to get in your car or Uber or whatever it is to go to a store. You find things that you're used to buying, you're comfortable buying online. So you're saving the cost of transportation, you're not paying the taxes, you just get the stuff delivered to your door. I'm not particularly in favor of sales taxes, but I don't think you should allow one entity to circumvent it and then follow a path that has, a lot of these retail shops and distribution operations employ many, many people. You put them out of business, not only are you killing incomes, and lessening the ability of your customers to buy the products, but you're also harming the people who own the real estate. Because, what are you going to do with a suburban J.C. Penney's store when it goes out of business?
I saw an article that said that Amazon is buying all of that and turning it into warehouses.
Again, there needs to be a fair assessment of this. I believe, in my view, when I look at Amazon's numbers, it's impossible to justify on the current numbers Amazon's valuation. It's just not, unless you're saying that Amazon is going to follow the model that did not work for China and Japan and will not work for China of crushing the competition, leaving the planet in a place where there's only Amazon, and then they raise their prices.
Yeah.
That predatory approach to life cannot be.
That's what they're trying to do.
Well, okay, but then somebody needs to stand up and say.
But that's what Uber is trying to do also. Put all the taxi companies out of business and then be the one name for taxis.
Right. So and this was now, Liawatha actually gets a bit of credit from me for calling out big tech, but of course her solutions are idiotic. And this really, if you get a chance later on to listen to anything, this interview with this guy, I think, what does he call himself? They're even referring to her Hiawatha.
Howie Carr?
No, they're referring to an interview with this gentleman. I don't know his name. The Breakfast Club. He's got a funny.
Oh, that's where Hillary Clinton had the hot sauce. Was the Breakfast Club?
Oh, is that right? Well, so this guy tears her apart.
Good.
And props, I think you're supposed to say, or hats off, or whatever you say.
Yeah, props to Breakfast Club.
Props to the Breakfast Club.
Yeah,
And this is one. You know, I when I think about Native Americans and the raw deal that Native Americans have got. If an ethnic group has a strong argument in the United States of America for not getting a fair shake, it's above all Native Americans. And here's a lily white poser who, you know, had an undistinguished record, figuring out, I know how to get tenure track at Harvard, I know how to get in the U.S. Senate, I'll say I'm an Indian. You know, just at the time that Harvard was under assault by various people, for being, the Harvard Law School was under assault for being an white men's club. And so she sails in there with her undistinguished record, claiming credit to be a Cherokee Indian. And now she's acting like, what? Yeah, people make mistakes, you know. How was I to know? I mean, it's nothing, it's just an honest mistake. My grandparents told me I was an Indian, so I'm an Indian, you know.
Google's not working well either, Charles. I'm trying to bring up an image of Hillary with the hot sauce. It is Breakfast Club, but it's not loading, so we won't do that.
All right.
Now, unfortunately, Michael Moore is texting me telling me that there's something wrong with More Paint. So I don't know if there is a wider internet outage happening. This is interesting stuff, Charles, because, you know, we live in this world now where if the internet were to go down, I mean, I would say that, you know, YouTube and Patreon are not critical to life, but they're down. Right. Imagine if the banks,
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
we would be screwed.
So we're going to turn, if we can, now to the balance of the presentation, which actually, there are quite a few slides here, but we'll be able to get through this in around 2 hours total, all in. So, by my way of thinking, remember, I started on this project with the Clinton Foundation in February of 2015. And there was a lot, because I'd done the work on GE, there was a lot of stuff in the public domain beginning to get attention as the Clinton Foundation faced a filing deadline for their annual IRS forms. And what happened was, Donna Shalala, who was then the president and CEO of the Clinton Foundation, now I think she's in Congress, and it was a university professor. So
Donna Shalala is in Congress?
I think she's in Congress.
Her nephew was Scott Bennett's lawyer who railroaded him right into jail for revealing terrorist finance stuff.
Nice family, the Shalalas. Yeah. But anyway, they put out this statement on the 16th of November. I had previewed the coming problems, and they put this statement out, Donna Shalala in her own name, saying her external tax reviewers said that the errors were in the tax return. They've been saying, I said early on in March, what the hell's going on with your returns? They're all screwed up. How come the IRS isn't auditing them? The Clinton Foundation says, no, we don't have, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So by November, they do amend their returns for 10, 11, 12, and 13, and then they file their 2014 form on a slightly different basis. But they make this claim that they had an external person, Kathy Keneally, who did the work, and that she hired an accounting firm. And they basically take the position that they didn't have to make, there's no reason to make a change in the historical returns. And that's just, as we're going to show you in a second, that's just utter crap. We go to the next slide.
I think lawyers and people like that are into just, you know, putting out some ridiculous thing and then, you know, chiseling away at the details until they get somebody to believe it.
Well, that's what they did here. They took Donna Shalala, makes her letters addressed to our supporters. Now, the Clinton Foundation doesn't have supporters. It's not a political operation in theory. They have contributors, not political supporters. She sends this bullshit letter out, and then she says, with regard to Kathy Keneally, in the letter it says, this quote is attributable to Kathy Keneally.
What does that mean?
Well, it means that, I think what it means is that DLA Piper, the law firm that employed Kathy Keneally, said, under no circumstances can you, the Clinton Foundation, claim that DLA Piper, the firm, gave the legal advice that you say you're relying on. I advised the foundation that it had no legal obligation to file amended returns. Now, that is a ridiculous comment. Under New York law, under California law, where the Clinton Foundation was then and now is soliciting, you have an ironclad obligation to update your returns if you become aware of a material error. And these errors we're going to show you were fatal. They weren't material errors. They were disqualified the Clinton Foundation from operating. So here you have the Clinton Foundation in the middle. Remember, this is November 16th, 2015. Hillary's been under investigation formally by the FBI since July 10th, 2015. And Comey's doing his level best to stand in front of that investigation and tamp it down so that Bernie doesn't take the seat away from Hillary. And this political operative, Donna Shalala, who had served in Bill Clinton's cabinet, it was nothing but a political hack.
That's generous, by the way.
It gets DLA Piper and this firm Cohn-Resnick, which I would argue should be shut down for the role of
Didn't Comey's brother work at DLA Piper?
Yeah, it's a big firm, but he did work at DLA Piper in theory. But they get together and they issue this theatrically to get a lot of attention. But this, if DLA Piper had given legal advice, a letter on their stationery that said, it's our considered opinion, here's the letter for the file, we reviewed this, here's the issue, we studied it, here's the regulations, here's the analysis, here's our conclusion. If they have such a memo, let them produce it. I think they didn't have such a memo. I think they were getting very concerned in Clinton land that Bernie was going to steal the show, and they needed to tamp down this theory that there was a problem with the Clinton Foundation, so they lied. They put out this ridiculous smokescreen saying that there's a law firm, there's an accounting firm, they've studied it, obviously this is fine, and now let's go get Hillary elected.
Well, in their defense, Charles, it does fall under the heading of, I only lied because I knew the truth would upset you.
Right, exactly.
The innovative reason somebody once told me.
Right. And so that's a good one. So by the 16th of November, remember, we know from the Horowitz report that a private citizen lawyer, got to Comey in May, I think it was, of 2015 and said, you need to investigate the Clinton Foundation. And by May, early May 2015, this is happening now 6 months later. And Dopey Comey's sitting there saying, I don't got a problem with the Clinton Foundation. He hadn't even opened an investigation until January of 2016. We need to put the set of facts back into the pile of facts, back into the chronology, to understand how the obstruction effort, the effort to obstruct an investigation into Clinton Foundation, fraud and corruption, how it took shape, when it was born, and who was flipping what levers at key stages as this thing evolved. So if we go to page 6, remember we have DLA Piper and Kathy Keneally saying, you've got no reason to amend your return. None at all. Okay. Well, we've taken, for the new viewers, we thought it was important just to remind you of some key facts. The Clinton Foundation has never obtained from the IRS authority to do any work outside, not just Little Rock, but the portion of Little Rock, the small 27-acre or 31-acre site where the Clinton Foundation was supposed to be concentrated. It has never amended its legal documents to expand its authority. It has never lawfully gotten expanded authority from the IRS or anybody else. It's just taken it, right? And that the act of doing that guts the legal status of the charity. This process of gutting the legal status of the charity began well before 2015. I would argue it began on October 23rd, 1997, after Bill and Hillary had spent many years with people like Lindsay and others, Bruce Lindsay, hiding or operating around a notion that there was going to be a charity without explaining to anybody that they were pulling the strings on the charity. They would put the front people out there to pretend that they're running it, but it's always Bill and Hillary. It's always Bruce Lindsay and others. They're the ones who orchestrated the use of a putative charity as a way to enrich themselves, attack their enemies, and promote their political ambition. So here's some minutiae for people to satisfy their curiosity. This thing was not a lawfully organized and operated charity. They had every reason to fear the IRS looking into this, every reason to fear the mishandling of classified investigation inquiry going into the bowels of the Clinton Foundation, and they were at fever pitch back on November 16th, 2015, trying to make sure that none of this came out before the November 2016 election. So you talk about interfering in an election, that's centrally what the Clinton Foundation people were doing, centrally what the Clinton campaign was doing, and centrally what the allies of the Clintons were doing a year before the election.
Michael Moore confirms that other videos are down outside of YouTube, and people are telling me that Google is out across the East Coast and some of Europe.
Wow.
Pretty surprising.
It is, it is.
Sorry, Charles.
That's all right. Well, let's hope some people are watching
And there's
this.
a social engineering effort going on in the comments here in Periscope, but we'll avoid it. The best thing for people to do when social engineers come into the comments, whatever platform we're on, trying to distract from the important information that Charles is sharing, is to become a sponsor of the show at subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth and send a message to the troll. I just became a sponsor of Crowdsource the Truth because of your comment. This will absolutely stop them from doing what they're doing. Sorry, Charles, please carry on.
So a big point here, and it might be time to bring up that story that Jay Sekulow wrote, but a big point here is that this fraud and corruption scandal is so big that countless people across the FBI, IRS, and Justice Department, and countless foreign governments already know about this. So when Barr and Durham and others break through the barricades to find the real emails, the real record, all of this, not just the scope of the fraud and corruption needs to be shared, but the effort to resist and obstruct the investigation, that needs to be shown so that we can really send a message to future generations that you may not burrow your way inside the FBI, IRS, and Justice, and then run the IRS, FBI, and Justice as a criminal enterprise supporting one or more political families. You can't do that.
Well,
And that has been going on, and so this needs to be shown. That you had pulled that up before one of the This Just In. I just want to show
The Jay Sekulow article?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an interesting article that we found after the slides were finished. No.
Where is it?
No. It's not that one.
Huh. You know what? I must have accidentally closed it. I'll get it back here real quick.
Anyway, it's a story that one of our close friends sent to me this morning, and it's really good. Thank you for doing that. And it basically says that hundreds of lawyers were tasked to respond to a Freedom of Information Act and other requests. That's the story here. Hundreds of lawyers were charged. This is written by Jay Sekulow, who's one of the president's top advisors, right, legal advisors right now. So he knows all about the Tea Party targeting. This happens, this is new testimony from 3 years ago, that's 16, but this timeline is interesting, that hundreds of lawyers were sent by the Obama administration to hide the extent to which the Obama administration was targeting Tea Party people. And hundreds of lawyers getting involved in anything is a scary thought, other than giving up their licenses to practice. But that you would need hundreds of lawyers to react here gives you a sense of just how massive the corruption must have been using the IRS to target your political enemies, and we see now in the Clinton Foundation using the IRS to protect your allies who are milking illegally foundations that aren't really foundations. This should really give pause to Barr. He needs to understand this is not a casual exercise. This is not something that will be countered by one U.S. attorney, John Durham. This is something that people, the crowdsource community needs to rise up. People around the world need to rise up. Governments need to demand their money back. They need to demand accountability from people who rubber stamp the Clinton Foundation, say the Gates Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, other people. We need to make this a thing. And we need to get it done. So if we go back to the slides, to the next one. Now remember, we heard from this lawyer that there was no need to amend the returns, okay? Now, as our loyal viewers understand, the Clinton Foundation is a special type of charity. It's not simply a Gates Foundation, it's a fraud, yeah. It's
Special meaning it has to wear a hockey helmet on a short bus?
No, it's a very, special in the sense that it has to jump through hoops to prove every reporting period that it is publicly supported. In other words, small donors from the general public have to be the ones who are or contributing at least a third of all the contributions. But there are other tests as well. It can't stray from its authorized purposes, which it did. It shouldn't have been doing all this heavy international work, which it did. It shouldn't be saying that it was fighting HIV/AIDS around the world when it had no authority to do that.
And it did not.
But the most important thing, there's something called Schedule A to the 990. We've never talked about this before. We won't get into all the math. It's just arithmetic and it's a little complicated. But one of the things you're supposed to do is keep track of your, quote, unusual grants that you've received in a year. And they explain these are monies that come to you because you're publicly supported. The donor looks and says, I want to give money to this charity. So many people in the United States are supporting it. I want to be on the train too. But I don't just want to be a small donor. I want to be a big donor. And these are supposedly unusual and unexpected. They came out of the blue. Somebody just said, they wanted to give me $50 million. What am I supposed to do? I've got to take the money. That kind of a thing. And then these are grants that are unexpected and large enough to screw up the calculation of whether you receive at least a third of all your donations in a period from the general public, okay? So what the Clinton Foundation did in Schedule A's that are filed for 7, 8, and 9, in 8, 9, and 10, is by sleight of hand, they said, our unusual grant, our total revenue is less than we would normally say it is because of these unusual grants. And they tried to hide that in Schedule A. You're supposed to, in Schedule A, provide a list of what these unusual grants were. And they did. They have never done that for 7, 8, and 9. They have never amended their returns. Now, what were these unusual grants that they've admitted to?
Tiger food?
They were grants, grants from Unitate, from one donor, which were not unexpected. They were negotiated. They were long-term grants. They still have not accounted for them properly.
Now, wait a minute. Actual serious question. Unitate started under Sarkozy, right?
Yep.
Sarkozy partnered with Hillary on killing Gaddafi. Gaddafi had financed Sarkozy's presidential campaign for $50 million. Something smells not too...
Exactly. And here, to remind people, we've talked about this before, these numbers it's going to be a little bit of a magic trick. You're going to see some of these numbers again shortly. But in the Unitate accounts for 7, 8, and 9, they show a total of $297 million having been sent by Unitate to something called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc., which doesn't exist, never existed. But in the Clinton admission of guilt, form for their charity for 7, 8, and 9, they have the amounts listed in each year, item 2 in the Schedule B. These are the amounts shown, which I believe to be the Unitate grants. And you see that in 2007, Unitate sent 71 million more to the Clinton Foundation than the Clinton declared as receiving. In 2008, another important election year, 57 million more, adding up to 95 million of more money going than was actually declared. In 2009, when Obama took over, they threw a small token back to Unitate. They declared more coming in than they'd actually gotten from Unitate. But all told, they got 64 million more from Unitate than is in the Clinton Foundation books. That is a serious problem. I mean, people go to jail for long periods of time.
For way less than that.
For 100,000, 25,000, 64 million, and
that's the $64 million question.
It was a $64 million person. But the point is, think of the number of people who knew inside Unitate, inside the IRS, inside Justice. There was an investigation launched. Fabienne has done several shows with us on it. The French government sort of studied it. The English government should have studied it. The Koreans are investors in Unitate, donors to Unitate. Many nations are donors to Unitate.
Anybody who flew to France was paying this.
Right, and so this lawyer, this idiot, Kathy Keneally, and her idiotic law firm DLA Piper, with this record to say that, buried in the middle of the Clinton Foundation uncorrected filings for 7, 8, and 9, still uncorrected to this day, is an admission that there were gigantic unusual grants, 233 million of unusual grants, were excluded from the calculation of whether this is a public charity. And that's just, you're running roughshod over the accounting process. BKD, in theory, was auditing this thing.
Charles.
It's okay. Was auditing this thing. And through multiple audits, they missed all this. And then in 2009, the Clinton Foundation was reorganized. In theory, this new entity, Clinton Health Access Initiative, was created in 2009, and they lied in that application saying there was no prior activity. I mean, this is, I'm sorry to be agitated about this, but this is such a big, brazen fraud. And that, Mueller would be swanning around as head of the FBI. He didn't see this. Comey sweeps up the crap after him. He doesn't see that. Mueller then, tries to cover Comey's backside. He doesn't want to admit this. And you have Shifty Adam Schiff, and you've got, Nadler and these other people, the Democrats, saying it's time to impeach Trump. You don't want to look at this fraud? This is a gigantic fraud.
Well, they can't look at this, Charles. You got evidence. They want stuff that has no evidence, or if there is any evidence, they'll destroy it.
Right. Well, so let's look at the next page. Okay. Now, people like to say to me, you're going so far back into history, it doesn't matter. This is important information from the from the Schedule A for 2013, which was the amended version of that was filed on the 16th of November 2015. Okay, so in Schedule A, what you have to do is you have to list out your total revenues, and that's what they did here in the first time in 2013, when they filed the one for 2013, sometime around between November 15th, 2014 and early in January 2015. At some point, or December, they filed this 2013 990 late, because the final filing deadline was, I think, the 15th of November 2015, but they hadn't gotten their audit together. You remember, the 2013 audit wasn't complete because Eric Braverman, the CEO, refused to sign off on it and resigned.
We have not heard anything significant about Eric Braverman in a long time.
Right. So the Schedule A, Jason, let me get your focus on this just for a second because it's important. It shows these total revenues, 2009, 126, 2010, the numbers indicated, right? But when we go to the original 990 for 2009, we see that the revenues are actually 242 million, not 127 million. The discrepancy is this number, 115,397,489, right? That's precisely the amount that Unitate gave in 2009.
Oh, so you found it.
Well, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's amazing. Yeah. So this is not just, I think a lot of people come here, Charles, and they listen and they enjoy your enthusiasm and they enjoy making comments about unrelated things. But that's amazing what you've just hit there.
Right. And so that's when, this is the version filed in 2013, and it had this monkey bit. There shouldn't be these discrepancies. There shouldn't be a case where you report more on your Schedule A that you received.
Who are you calling a moron?
Moron. Anyway, so the cumulative discrepancy is 105,076,837, but when they refile the 990 in 2015 for 2013, the only discrepancy you have is this one we find, which is the Unitate.
Wow.
amount. All right. So why is that important? It means that you're sitting there as an auditor, you're Price Waterhouse in 2013 doing this audit, and you should be asking yourself, what the hell what is this unusual grant from Unitaid in 2009? What's that all about? Because let me see this application for federal tax exemption for the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and let me understand how the Clinton Foundation was reorganized. These are the types of questions an auditor normally would ask, because this is a big discrepancy, 115 million. Was this really unusual? Or was this a strategic relationship that Bill and Hillary Clinton had forged with the French government to create Unitaid? This wasn't unusual. This was just illegal and corrupt, right? And real accountants at PwC, maybe they put the same team that was doing the Academy Awards 2 years ago, was too busy looking at cleavage to focus on the actual...
Did they admit that?
Of course, they're not going to admit that.
The other thing that Sidney Powell mentioned that I wanted to ask you about, and I won't ask you about it now because it has nothing to do with this, but she is super pro Arthur Andersen and claims that the Enron thing destroyed Arthur Andersen, and they did something kind of blamed it on them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've read her book. You read her book. I mean, we'll talk about that at the end. So just continuing down the freight train, the numbers freight train. I'll try not to dwell on too many of the numbers. Let's look at the next page. Okay. Now, just for the audience that's new, this information that you see here on the makeup of the contributions that went into the Clinton Foundation is purposefully removed from the Clinton Foundation website, this information. We obtained it in New York State on their website. We obtained it in California. We obtained it, I think, in Michigan as well. All right, so this is an entity breakdown that BKD swore off on in 2009, showing, the total revenues, the contributions of grants, I call them donations, how much were from CHI, how much were from something called climate, how much was from the Clinton Hunter Development Initiative, and how much was from the Clinton-Giustra Sustainable Growth Initiative. And you add all this up, and then you say they show you how much is from, quote, the foundation. So the foundation is supposed to exclusively further the tax-exempt authorized purposes of the foundation, which were to operate something in Little Rock, okay? And if you accept, which I don't, that the amount shown for foundation is all legitimate. It's not, it's largely illegitimate. But let's just say it's all legitimate. All was following, just operating the presidential thing in Little Rock. We express here the percent that each activity is as a percentage of the foundation. So CHI's activities were 3.5 times, 347% of the foundation, okay? And you use the phrase moron. Even an arithmetic moron would look at that and say, well, 347% of anything is a big number, right? You're supposed to exclusively do what the foundation said it was going to do. You got this carbuncle over here, CHI, 347% of my core authorized operation. Climate, which is a joke when you look at the financials, that's more than a third the authorized, and the others, the CHDI is a peanut, it's 1%, and the thing in Canada is a peanut at 3%, but all told, you're almost 387% of the foundation is engaged in unauthorized activities, which were never organized or operated lawfully.
That's a lot of it.
And that's basically all of it, right? And so you're sitting there as PwC, even PwC, BKD may not ever figure this out, but even PwC has some people in it who are smart enough to look back at this file and say, now, wait a minute, we should never, the CEO of the company resigned between the time we issued our audit and PwC filed the 2013 990. We have serious problems. We are supposed to guard the public interest. We at PwC should stand up and do something about that. And what they did is they said, you know what, this is a good gig. We get to spend time with Bill Clinton. Let's do it again. So we'll do it 14, we'll do it 15. PwC stays on until 16, when Cohen Resnick, the great firm that didn't find the fraud in the beginning, in 2015, they sign up to do work with regard to 17 and 18.
You know, Charles, if 387% of your organization is dedicated to fraud, you might be hiring. You've got a lot of work to do.
So the point is that BKD knew about this fraud, the Clinton Foundation knew about it, the IRS knew about it, they all knew about it. And people keep saying, you know, why do you want these missing emails? Because these missing emails and others we haven't found yet are going to document this. They absolutely, the Obama administration was willingly duped by the MOU in 2008. They couldn't have known the depth of this. They probably didn't want to think about how bad it was. But then once they got into the saddle and they started targeting errant charities, Tea Party charities in their view, they knew that charity fraud was a thing. And they had people, some people inside the Obama administration had to have been horrified by this, but they were forced to let it slide. And you know, BKD, they knew about it, and they just figured they'd never be caught. And they were a dominant player in Arkansas. This is a set of federal crimes, and that the headquarters for BKD is in Missouri, so a lot of traffic is probably across state lines considering these frauds. The big law firm, Williams and Connolly, they had to know it was a fraud. They've been in the center, they're the ones who filed the papers on this, saying it was going to be just operating Little Rock, yet they got paid for it over many years.
Is that Lanny Davis or Lanny Brewer? I can never
Neither,
remember.
it's David Kendall and
David
those people. And people in the IRS, you know, I would argue how, the IRS was unionized under Obama's watch. How many people in the IRS are fully aware of this fraud?
Unionized under Obama's watch. So there was never a union at the IRS before.
Right.
And what union is it? IRS workers?
The union of fraudsters. I don't know. I mean, it's just this is really, you know, deplorable. You talk about deplorable. This is totally deplorable. And if we're going to simplify our taxes as we have under Trump, you know, why do we need so many IRS agents as we had in the past? And why are we auditing less than 1% of all charities?
Wow.
So, and certainly, you know, Bob Mueller, now maybe he's just a figurehead and doesn't do anything and is, you know, walking around with his head in the clouds, but he had to have known that this was a raging inferno of fraud. So this is just, I picked on 2009. Let's go to the videotape, Jason. Let's look at another one. Okay? Now we're going backwards in time. Same exercise for 2012. We take the original filing, which was filed on the 15th of November 2013. It was a fraud because by that moment, on November 2nd, 2013, the Clinton family illegally took control of the Clinton Foundation by amending their bylaws. They put this filing here out, and then a couple years later, on the 16th of November 2015, they do a revised filing. And here we see the discrepancies. They don't quite foot in this 2013 effort, but when in the amended one, we see that 82,743.18, the exact to the penny number that I believe is what the Clinton Foundations claim they got from Unitaid, when in fact they got far more than that in 2008. Okay, that's to the dollar, the exact precise number here and here. And when we in accounting or finance people, when you see, you know, an exact to the dollar match,
Can't be a mistake.
it's not. This is
It's like a puzzle piece
yeah.
fitting
This
in.
and it's not like it's just a small piece of the puzzle
It's a
of the
key and a lock.
yeah of the. It's 48%
Wow.
of the 2009 amount, and it's 43% of the 2008 amount. So accountants typically, when they talk off the cuff, they'll say, you know, if you push them, you know, what's a material error? They'll say typically 3% to 10%.
Right.
But there is no standard. 48%, even BKD, even those dumbasses at BKD should have been able to see that this was a forced fraud, and that by allowing the Clinton Foundation to proceed down a path, you know, where it had multiple false and materially misleading applications sail through the IRS under Obama's watch, creating more fake charities, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, the Clinton Global Initiative, the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, the Clinton Bush-Shady Fund, on and on and on. Even those dumbasses at BKD should have stood up and said, "Now, wait a minute, this is a bridge too far for us. Okay, we have a duty to the public. This is a rampant fraud. We see in this behavior that they'll never stop. They're going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We have to stand up and do something about it." So this is, I've just, by going slowly backwards, we've done it 2 times, Jason. Do you think we go back in the next page? I'm going to show you the materiality of the unauthorized activities as a percentage of the foundation. Here we see that CHI is 400% of the foundation, okay? And that when you combine the numbers for 8 and 9, it's 368%. When you look at all of the operations for 2008 and 2009, what's the number? What percentage does it come up with?
Where are we looking? 411?
411.
You better call 411.
There you go.
Do people outside of New York City know about 411?
Isn't it 311?
311. 411 is like getting the number, but that doesn't even exist anymore.
Right, well, I'm just saying, so I mean, this is not, again, even the dumbasses at BKD would look at this and say, wait a minute, we got a serious problem. 411% of our revenues are, and that assumes that the 83 million that they say they spent on the foundation those 2 years, you know, is valid, which I asked the question, you know, you built this foundation by 2004 or 5 timeframe, supposedly for 165 million. That was the capital cost of putting the thing together and giving an endowment to the National Archives. Why are you spending 84 million on anything?
I got a maybe better or maybe worse question, but I mean, I understand how you could look at, like, let's say, hey, the company made $100 last year and $411 this year, so that's 411% growth or whatever. Maybe I did the math wrong, but you know what I mean. When it comes to revenue, how can you have 411%? It's like, that's more money than they got?
Right.
Right. So
Right.
what the hell is going on?
Exactly. You know, it's clear that this thing was absolutely out of control. And that, you know, Bill Clinton and Ira Magaziner and Bruce Lindsay and Hillary Clinton were using this as a perpetual motion machine to finance their political ambitions, to go after their enemies, reward their friends, and buy 2 mansions and maintain an apartment in New York and who knows what other properties around the world. So we'll do one more turn on it. Let's go back one more year. And, you know, you see the same pattern. Here, that's what's really interesting. We go through that drill of, did Obama know, did he not know? Okay? The 2007 990 for the Clinton Foundation was filed on the 13th of November, 2008. So that's after the election of 2008, but before Hillary Clinton was selected as Secretary of State, in theory. Okay? The Clinton Foundation files illegally a 990, which shows that 34% of their revenues, they listed as an unusual grant. We can document that it came from Unitate. That's to the number, to the penny. You see that in Schedule B. There's a number 347434141, which I believe is what Unitate, they claimed Unitate sent them. So they claim on the 13th of November 2008 that Unitate sent to the Clinton Foundation 34.7 million. Okay, and we know that on March 31st, 2008, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has said to the Clinton Foundation, shut this operation in Massachusetts down. You are involuntarily revoked in Massachusetts. Right? There is no Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative. So they, knowing all that, Obama gets in and they say, we're going to sign our 990, you know, with the lies in it. We're going to confess to fraud because we know Obama's taking over and we'll be able to cover it up. And then we'll sign the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, on the 16th of November, 3 days after that, saying that everything's hunky-dory with the Clinton Foundation. Everything's just fine. When in fact, it is a rapacious fraud. It is a corruption engine, okay? And so we see, these numbers are huge, okay? We don't know yet how much money actually went towards the Clinton Foundation. We don't know how much money went to CHI. We don't know how much money Ireland really sent, or Australia, or Norway. Only the Irish government will know. Only the UK government. And now, do they want to stand up and say, you know, we've been defrauded too? Some will and some won't. But I just tell you, as a numbers person, there are no coincidences here. Okay, this is documentary evidence that these people knowingly conspired to defraud Unitaid, to defraud the U.S. taxpayer, to defraud the state of Arkansas, to defraud various states across the United States and around the world. They've been at this exercise, this chapter, since October 23rd, 1997. And no one seems to have the courage in our various governments and around the world to stand up. We do not stand for this type of charity fraud, unless maybe we do. Right? So if we go one more page, again, these forms, like the ones for 2008 and 9, all this information is purposefully hidden on the Clinton Foundation website. The BKD had put these schedules together. You can see their work on their fraudulent work on New York State and California, Michigan websites. These numbers are extracted from that fraudulent work. And again, for 7, 8, and 9, this shows that the unauthorized revenues, cumulative unauthorized revenues, were $441 million, or 361% of the declared revenues for the foundation, which, again, shouldn't have been spending $122 million on anything other than the Little Rock complex, which certainly didn't need $122 million. A large portion of that $122 million was for the Clinton Global Grifter Initiative,
Booze and chicks,
and the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, and various other sundry projects that were never authorized by anyway. So the real math is way worse than this. I'm saying I'll give them a pass on the Clinton Grifter Initiative. I'll give them a pass on the Alliance and other stuff. I'll say that's legitimate. And when you do that, you still come away saying 361% of the money they spent was completely illegitimate. And these crack accountants, BKD on crack accountants, BKD, yes, PwC, and Cohn-Resnick, you know, they look at this and probably say, you know what? If we give the Clintons a pass and they win, then we've got them. You know, our clients will be protected. Never will they, you know, go after our clients, because we know the truth about what the Clintons did and what the Obamas allowed to happen, and the fact the Bushes didn't do anything about it. We'll sit on top of the federal government as accountants. We'll be able to trade with this. This is a fantastic lever to have against the swamp.
So they thought.
So they thought. So
we should make a graphic of Truman the Tiger with a crack pipe in it.
Exactly.
The crack accountants.
Exactly. So the one final slide, and I see I'm getting pretty good at ending on time. This takes it back a layer further, and this shows that they claim they had no unusual grants in 2006. Now in 2006, they also claim they're using accrual accounting. We know. Accrual, which means that if somebody says they're going to pay you, and checks out.
I heard a cruel accounting.
Rule.
It was pretty cruel, this accounting.
So we know that in 2006, there was no such thing as the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative. It had been merged, in theory, out of existence on December 31st, 2005, and it never perfected the merger as it needed to do in multiple foreign locations. Yet the revenues jumped from 2005 up to 2006 by about 35 million. And there are lots of press accounts that in that period they were doing HIV/AIDS work. The question is how, and how come they didn't describe any of that work as unusual in 2006? How come nobody went over any of that at BKD? I think we know the answer, because they were hopelessly compromised, to put it politely. And yet they make the decision in 7, 8, and 9 that there are these massive, unusual grants. Massive, 229 million of unusual grants in 7, 8, and 9, what they say. The real number is more like 297 million, but this is what they declare. So you look at this and you say, this is a long-standing pattern and practice of deceptive work involving the Clinton family, the Clinton trustees, Williams and Connolly and multiple law firms, BKD, PwC, Cohn-Resnick and multiple accounting firms, multiple executives, multiple donors, all worked in concert to deprive we the people of tax revenue that is monumental here. You know, when you consider the tax revenue that the Clintons haven't yet paid, that they have to pay, the interest and penalties, you consider the valuable asset that the Gates Foundation, for example, got, being able to accumulate its vast, the difference between its revenues and its expenses, tax-free, piling up by the billions.
Well, and we're all going broke paying taxes, and these billionaires and ex-presidents are making money off our backs.
Right. And so for me, again, people like to give me, I don't have a problem people trying to give me shit, but they say, you're just you're passionately anti-Clinton. No, I would not limit my passion to just being anti-Clinton. I'm anti-fraudster. And if we have a very simple decision to make as a country. We let this crap stand, and we let people get off with a slap on the wrist, and let's just admit it, we're done. Because if this precedent stands, then all the shysters on the planet are going to move to the United States of America and say, I want to be president of the United States. I mean, I think we see that in the Democratic campaign.
Exactly.
But
now, Charles, UFC NHL, a regular viewer of ours who is very probably a fan of both hockey and the Ultimate Fighting Championship, wants to know if you can address this. It might be too broad a question for right now, but is Soros using charity to sponsor political activities? Is that legal?
It's absolutely not legal, and I believe he has been doing that his entire charitable career. That's exactly what I think Soros in particular, and I haven't studied his foundations as closely as I've studied this one, but he has profited from creating instability around the world in markets and countries. And when instability happens, traders can make more money.
Bet on the currencies and whatever.
Especially if they know when the instability is going to happen because they're involved creating it. But beyond that, if you destroy the Soviet Union, and I'm not saying he did that alone, but if you destroy the Soviet Union, and you then come in and sweep up all their assets at fire sale prices and then flip them into the public markets, that's a reason to want instability. And then what you say is, isn't it a terrible place? The world is so unstable. I need to have a foundation to get suckers to give me money so we can stop the instability. And so where you start getting into the open society foundations are organized in various places around the world, and it is alleged by many that these foundations are used to make grants to politicians and politically connected people who will then shift the politics of a country towards a place more hospitable to George Soros and his allies. And that is absolutely, if it's true, absolutely forbidden. Charities are not supposed to, 501c3 public charities like the Clinton Foundation are absolutely barred, expressly barred from either partisan political activity favoring a candidate or opposing a candidate. Wow. So the Tommy Steyers of this world who may be meddling that way, the Hillary Clintons who can't stop meddling this way, the Chelsea Clintons, strictly forbidden. You can't use a nonprofit charity like this one to, as a place to get all the unemployable political hacks that are around the Clinton, give them feather bedding jobs in a charity. You can't use a charity to disguise to just give people gifts of plane fare, vacations, and meals, and other benefits. You're just not allowed to do any of that. But because there's never been a real audit, there's never been a fair-minded, honest trustee of the Clinton Foundation of any of these people, they've been able to let this precedent stand. And Donald Trump needs to stand up and tear this precedent apart, and set down a new set of precedents so that we don't have this cloud hanging over charity land.
Well, it seems like he may be poised to do that, Charles, doesn't it?
I hope so.
We've heard a lot of things going on. People have been sending me articles that the IT guy for the Clintons, his home got raided. Like someone who lives near there, I think, told us that, or was that nationally reported? That somebody sent me that this morning. That was pretty interesting. And then, of course, Charles, the most popular movie this weekend was, oh wait, we're gonna get this, Trumpzilla. He's getting ready to spew fire and brimstone and
let's hope,
and take these people out. Now, I've been very distracted by some of the technical problems we've been experiencing here on YouTube. I think a lot of people were trying to reach us there. The first chat message came through here on the chat interface from YouTube saying, "Where's Jason?" And now I am able to get to the streaming interface on YouTube over here, but it looks like it may be fixing itself just in time for the show to be over. So that's interesting that the YouTube
Precisely.
outage lasted almost the exact. There it is. Is it rolling on YouTube? No, it still says waiting for Jason Goodman. Oh, so I don't know. All kinds of weird things going on with YouTube today, Charles. I guess people will. We're gonna do something to get this show onto YouTube after the broadcast. There's something else unfortunate that happened over here that won't affect anybody's ability to view the show, but that's been weird. And Charles, I want to thank you for another excellent broadcast today. I hope that people who watched us today will become sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth. If you're watching Sunday with Charles weekly, even if this is your first time, if you enjoyed the show, it's incredibly important that you become a sponsor. We really need your sponsorship here. We're heading into the back nine of 2019, and Crowdsource the Truth needs to grow. We need your sponsorship. We want to have people getting on to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, or make a one-time sponsorship payment by going to paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. Sponsors at the $10 and higher mark will receive the universally popular Sunday with Charles screensaver, and you'll be able to enjoy a load of exclusive content on Patreon and Subscribestar. I understand that this Google outage may have somehow affected those things as well, so as soon as we end here, I'll be looking into the technical snafu, and we'll try to correct it, and there we go.
On we go.
On we go. Thank you very much, Charles. Thanks to all of our viewers and our sponsors, and I'll see everybody tomorrow.